all appreciate that we are here because we were asked to play this role. We have done the job as best we can. That's why I went back to December 2015. And the record is very clear about what we've delivered over the past 14 or 15 months.
Of course, we've all been following the news flow that unfolded last night, and Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan and his deputy, Mcebisi Jonas, having been axed. Key now, of course, the replacement, Malusi Gigaba, sitting in that finance minister position, and we see Sifiso Buthelezi taking up deputy finance minister. How did you feel when you saw this news coming through last night?
Complete shock, and of course not very positive for the markets. And again, this was speculated earlier on this week, Bronwyn, following the recall of the finance minister from his investor roadshow.
Zuma has potentially surrounded himself with his allies and now has a firmer grip on the country's purse strings.
Exactly.
If we go back to Monday, dollar rand was trading at about 12.34. Currently, we're looking at around 13.44, 13.48. That's almost a 9% move. This really is going to hit us from a publicity point of view, and the ratings downgrade now comes back firmly onto the table.
In a space of 15 months, 4 finance ministers, Nhlanhla Nene, Des van Rooyen, Pravin Gordhan, and now Malusi Gigaba. So clearly adding to the strain, as you say, with regard to your confidence.
And of course, all eyes today will be on what happens with the ANC top 6. Is everybody going to stand by this decision? Will we see some resignations, which will certainly allude to fractures within the ANC, which many are expecting right now? One thing that we can assure you of is that it is going to be a day like no other in South Africa, and we're going to be watching that news flow fast and furious right here on CNBC Africa.
I've only listened to a small part of it, but it seems to be going exactly as we wanted.
So if you don't mind me saying, reports were suggesting 2 minutes ago that you are not the incumbent anymore. Anything to add on that?
I'm here.
Are you still the finance minister?
Well, I'm here. Otherwise, what interest would I have in this court? You mustn't believe rumors, you see.
Malusi Gigaba himself has previously been linked to the Guptas. Does the see concerns regarding state capture re-emerge?
I am of the opinion that a big part of the movement had already occurred since the recall. So I'm not of the opinion that we will see a run up much further than most probably 1375 or 1380.
One of the things about institutions that I've learned over time is that it can take many years to build a solid institution. It takes a very short time to mess it up.
Adrian, how do you anticipate the markets to react, given that we might see banking stocks and, of course, the currency come under significant pressure?
I think that the most obvious place to go and look is what the response is in bank stocks. I think you can expect government bonds will price down as the South African market opens. I won't be surprised if there is a downgrade, and it's S&P that's most likely to act first.
We were chatting at 12 o'clock last night, deciding whether we should start broadcasting at 1 o'clock. And in fact, I suppose we may as well share this, in that the decision was that if we saw a replacement, the like of Brian Molefe, then we would have to regroup very quickly. So perhaps we can, in that, say that Malusi Gigaba is in fact, well, we deemed him to be a slightly safer choice. This appears to be a last-ditch attempt by President Jacob Zuma to hang on to power and to safely be able to pass that power on to Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, given the backing of the ANC Youth League and the ANC Women's League, which he now clearly has from the people that he's assembled around him. Besides Bile Dlamini is Faith Mutabi. Yeah, I knew you would see that reaction from the both of you. I mean, let's just go back to her portfolio and her stance as Minister of Communications, the meddling, may I call it, in the SABC editorial affairs, of which Parliament came out as heavy-handed on Faith Mutabi. I mean, this is, those are ANC stalwarts within Parliament, also taking a heavy stance, but now she's holding one of the biggest and most important portfolios within the administration, and that is communications of Public Services Administration.
So changes in the air, ladies, how do you feel?
Yeah, how do you feel?
Not very confident at the moment. As such, I want to move on to a different topic before we disappoint other individuals. But another minister who's clearly been in the headlines and was also quite vocal about his disappointment and disapproval of Jacob Zuma is Derek Hanekom, former Minister of Tourism.
Business Leadership South Africa, we have sent a letter asking a honest transparent meeting with the top six, asking for a meeting with the presidency, but also issuing a statement that says it's not too late. Honestly, this formidable partnership between government, business, labor and civil society, we need to use it as a force for good.
I think not only have we reached the inflection point, we have just gone over the precipice. I think the president's constitutional prerogative is to provide dignified leadership in the interest of all South Africans. Instead, what we witnessed this morning is that his actions have undermined our country at a time when it needs leadership more than ever.
Well, I will part with his parting words. His parting words to me as I was chasing him across the road in Pretoria from the High Court. He said to me, please don't follow me anymore. And clearly, I can't.
Did you at all anticipate Malusi Gigaba in this portfolio? Because he is not a name that I can tell you I had heard from any quarter. But perhaps I was out of the loop on this one.
No, I did not expect it. I didn't hear it from anywhere else. It was quite a surprise. He has to come and do a few things. One, investor confidence has been thwarted. In an environment where business confidence itself is actually depressed. So a few things that needs to happen here is to...
So Lesiba, I just want to draw attention to the dollar rand right now. We are at 13.50. It looks as though we are retracing ground quite quickly. We're going to keep getting regular updates on that local unit. A top side being thrown around today at 13.75, 13.80. Do you think we'll break through 14?
It's possible. It's possible. This is going to be a shock.
My views at this point in time is that there will be a motion of no confidence that is going to be brought to the National Assembly today by the opposition parties. And it will be interesting to see whether we see any changes. I mean, historically, these motions have really just come and gone. And this will be very much a test, I guess, of the unity within the ruling party.
Does that mean we're likely to get a downgrade this year, Mohammed?
I think it's fairly likely. I think if you judge just at a surface level, if you have a look at Standard & Poor's, Standard & Poor's, who have historically been the most bearish on South Africa, they've indicated that any erosion of institutions in South Africa, and I'm not necessarily saying this de facto constitutes an erosion of the institutions in South Africa, but any erosion in our institutions, any heightened political risk, and I would read that as a cabinet reshuffle of this magnitude would certainly tick that box. Heightened political risk could catalyze an out-of-cycle downgrade.
This is a mistake that many people make. The ruling party, its policy conference and its electoral conference makes the political decisions about how to manage the economy. The Treasury manages the government's finances, and it's assigned by the Constitution to manage them prudently and so on. But it does not make economic policy.
What are you expecting to unfold in terms of that phrase, radical economic transformation?
I expect a lot of smoke and mirrors, which will be described as radical economic transformation.
I could go on and on for an hour, just to give you examples of the full destruction by those ANC factions. But one thing is clear, the faction controlled by Jacob Zuma, controlled by crony capitalists who are corrupt to the bone under the leadership or stewardship of the Gupta family, will plunge South Africa even faster into a kleptocratic predatory state.
We need information. The market needs to know where we're going as a country. We are almost, it's a historic moment. It needs to be explained.
We are also seeing a strong outcry from many South Africans. The term #Zuma must fall is trending yet again, and this comes on the back of that cabinet reshuffle and, of course, increased volatility within the local unit.
I just wanted to point to the volatility on the rand. We're now back at 13.47. We spiked all the way, I think, if I'm correct, to about 13.43, 44 on dollar rand. So I think the operative term is volatility, and hold on to your hat today because we have no idea which direction this currency is going to go in.
But what I think is most important right now is for government to come out. I mean, this thing has come out, but the statement can only go so far.
Yeah.
Right now, I think we need proper communication. I think they need to come at us and stabilize markets, stabilize fears, let us know why, Malusi Gigaba will make an outstanding finance minister. How much of this do you think is the hidden hand of the Gupta family?
Perhaps they are amongst those who are leading the corporate capture of the state. They are not the only ones, there are others. But to the extent that that is the case, we felt that their citizenship of South Africa should be revoked by our government.
We continue to see market performance coming through, and of course lots of nervousness on the market front as to how we'll see the all-share index opening up in positive territory, very slightly so, but a lot of participants expecting this to change in trajectory and actually see a red arrow next to it. And as things stand, banks are losing ground by 7.6% so far, financials 4%, and this is likely to continue in negative territory, especially as international participants continue with their involvement on the local bourse.
You're looking very somber this morning, sir.
Well, none of us slept very much last night, did we?
I know. Now, when you start coming back with one word, it means you've had little sleep and you are very negative this morning.
Well, I mean, seriously, I think South Africa has reached something of a crossroads with the statement last night and the very shocking and stunning move by President Zuma to fire the finance minister and other colleagues like Derek Hanekom and Deputy Minister Jonas in particular. Those are the standouts. Business Leadership South Africa, the CEO initiative, are deeply distressed about the developments. We think it's ill-timed and irrational. We are highly concerned about the consequences for the investment grade rating. And I would say this is somewhat playing Russian roulette with the rating and with the asset prices of the country.
The decision to dismiss Minister and Deputy Minister of Finance has severe consequences for the economy, so certainly echoing what Colin Coleman is saying in studio. The statement from the CEO initiative and a final point made question where the vacuum of leadership created by the cabinet reshuffle is in the country's best interests.
It would appear that all of the new ministers are Zuma loyalists, and
the
they are
Treasury
by
is a
definition,
particular concern once you get your hands
indeed.
on the country's purse strings.
It's obviously a major concern. I mean, it is unprecedented, as Grady Mantashe said this morning, for the ANC not to be in support of what its president has decided to do. And clearly the South African Communist Party, COSATU, business and the ANC itself have all been against this reshuffle, and it will have consequences. It's not going to be without consequence.
Well, the currency isn't reacting that much at all, and I think we shouldn't forget maybe that the people in politics do watch the currency, and the currency is sending a signal that the market has no problem with the reshuffle. It's quite bizarre, to be honest. Sort of arguments I've been having with investors this week are that they assume there's going to be some civil war within the ANC. We were having a civil war in the ANC. Well, I think there are a few points to make. The first is we're going into this event with a weaker economy than pre-Nenegate. There was a lot of consumer momentum into Nenegate that helped the economy avoid recession last year. That's not the case now. We're going to see a severe growth and fiscal shock coming through that we have to wait to see.
Yeah, the big concern with the banks is that Basel III says you have to hold X amount of safe debt. If we get a debt downgrade, all of a sudden the South African bonds that the banks are holding, the banks can't be holding those anymore, and they have to go find other assets to put their money into and take a big haircut on the existing bonds. So not good for banks, not good for the equity position, and that's what you're seeing the market say is we're expecting probably a downgrade to happen sometime this year. That's not good for you guys. We don't want to hold you anymore.
How did you feel, just now, not as a business person, but as an individual South African citizen?
Yeah, I think anger is probably the first emotion that comes to the fore. You've got 1 in 3 South Africans who are essentially unemployed. You've got 50% of our workforce don't even have matric. Is this move good for the unemployed? I don't think this move is good for the unemployed. It doesn't create growth, it doesn't create confidence. You need confidence for investing. Investing creates growth, growth creates job creation. You don't see that coming through.
First, I think business needs to get together, since I'm here in Basa and part of the CEO initiative as well. And I've just gotten off the phone with the CEOs of Business Leadership, Chamber of Mines, BUSA, and ourselves, and we will be meeting on Monday. I think some serious introspection is going to happen among some in the ANC this weekend as to exactly where some people stand. I think that we're going to have to see how we move forward on the fact that we have a president that's not looking at national interests at the moment.
We've gone over the edge of the precipice. Do you concur?
Here's a minister, deputy minister that were doing a great job under very difficult circumstances are fired, when there are a whole range of ministers who courts have said are doing a bad job, the public knows are doing a bad job, have performed badly consistently that are still in cabinet, okay? So one has to ask, what's the rationale for this? This has never been about making Pravin Gordhan a superhero. This has always been about the qualities he espouses and MTBC espouses.
Do you not think the time for talk is over and business now needs to stand at one with all of those who are going to fight this?
I think what business needs to say unequivocally, and we have said this, that we are extremely unhappy at the removal of these two people, okay? It has no reflection on the replacements.
Stephen, give us your stance on what has transpired and what we can potentially expect to transpire as we roll with this news flow.
For me, perhaps the big story of the morning has been Gwede Mantashe, the ANC Secretary General, saying on our outlet and on others that the ANC was not properly consulted. He says he doesn't feel comfortable with this reshuffle. We've never heard this kind of thing before from a Secretary General. I find this really very interesting. Gwede Mantashe is not going to take this lying down. It's certainly not in his stance. Neither is Pravin Gordhan, I think. And some of the protest action we'll see today in Cape Town and Pretoria may be just the beginning.
This is what the South African set of business leaders said about the cabinet reshuffle. The decision and the manner in which it was taken is likely to cause severe damage to an economy that is in dire need of growth and jobs, said the CEO Initiative, an organisation that includes executives of Nedbank, Standard Bank, the Stock Exchange, JSE and Investec. So mildly important group of people as well. Bronwyn Nielsen joins us live from Joburg. Bronwyn, lovely to speak to you. Just talk us through what's going on here and the ramifications of it.
We are definitely still reeling from the news flow. Obviously, we knew something was afoot when Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan was recalled from his international roadshow. He was in London at the time, set to meet with heavyweight investors and the rating agencies. He received a one-line statement from President Zuma saying, "Come back." And from there, we've been anticipating a cabinet reshuffle all week. It happened just before midnight. We didn't expect the extent and size of the cabinet reshuffle. Effectively, 20 positions have been changed, and the new cabinet is very representative of Zuma loyalists, so to speak. It is certainly in line with the thinking of the ANC Youth League and the ANC Women's League. And many are saying that this move is an attempt to pave the way for Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma to come in as president of the African National Congress at the elective Congress, which happens in December of this year. Steve, if that happens, we would be sitting with a situation where we have Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma as president of the African National Congress, the ANC, and President Zuma would then remain as president of the Republic, and that position would be held until 2019. Now, I think key concern here, obviously, with regards to the reshuffle, are the positions of the finance minister. Former Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan was fired last night, and so too was his Deputy Minister Mcebisi Jonas. Sentiment is that potentially our new Finance Minister Malusi Gigaba, who just yesterday was the Minister of Home Affairs, is a Zuma loyalist. He comes from KwaZulu-Natal, which is President Zuma's home ground. And also his deputy is now Sifiso Buthelezi, again, someone who has been deemed a Zuma loyalist.
All right, Bronwyn, thank you so much for bringing us that report. And interesting when you talk about the successor there, the incoming finance minister, one of the immediate criticisms, Steve, was that he had very little finance experience. So it'll be interesting to hear what more we find out about his view.
If you don't want your currency to collapse, you need to have confidence. We all know about confidence. The IMF says it's such a key ingredient in an economic recovery. That's why they inject so much capital into places like Greece. They try and build confidence up as well.
The market will not like it if this ends up being the final answer. You know, in terms of holding the purse strings of government, ultimately spending taxpayers' money on government departments and government institutions, which in some cases, you know, could be considered to be dubious spending. As I say, from a market perspective, that is of grave concern.
What are your thoughts on where the market is going to go? How big will the sell-off be where the banks are concerned? What will happen to the bond market in South Africa and certainly the currency? I mean, what are we looking at? 16, 17 on dollar rand?
You know, I think all bets are off in terms of, you know, exact numbers. I think the best indication we have of what could happen is what happened in December 2015, the so-called Nenegate episode. But certainly the kind of developments that we saw last night, that's not positive for anybody. And I think Friday night dinner tonight will be filled with people shaking their heads, and it will be very negative conversation.
You tell me that the markets are not taking this too well. So let's hear why.
The reason why I say so is because we are all getting used to whenever there's some political new developments that the rand usually gaps and the rand takes a huge knock. This hasn't happened this time around. Why is that so? And my suspicion is that we've learned a very important lesson, and I will not be surprised if the Reserve Bank is providing some liquidity. That's cushioning the rand to a large extent. But more importantly, I think much of this has been in the market already. In fact, the rand has been very, very weak for a very long period of time. And when the rand traded at close to 12 rand not too long ago to the US dollar, everybody was saying that the rand is very strong. That's not the case. The rand was simply less weak.
Davi, you are sounding, if I may, and it may be a little cheeky, but you're sounding a lot calmer than usual.
Well, I'm very much concerned. I'm very concerned about the quality of South Africa's political leadership. But what I'm very happy about is the working of South Africa's financial markets.
Save South Africa campaign has called upon people to take to the streets today to demonstrate our anger at this action that the president has taken in reshuffling the cabinet in the way that he has done. People will be assembling here outside Parliament in about half an hour from 11 o'clock onwards. People are already gathering at National Treasury in Pretoria. Slogans about radical economic transformation are meaningless in the absence of a clear direction.
Lawson, you're not going to be backing down until you see change. I want to get clarity on that.
This absolutely not. This campaign is about ensuring that our democracy is restored, that our institutions of governance are there doing the jobs that the Constitution requires them to do and not serving the narrow interest. So we will not stand down until we have achieved those objectives.
We are expected to see a retaliation, and that the currency is building that retaliation in that we are not going to accept this status quo. Mark, give me your stance and what business is going to do about the current situation unfolding.
Morning, Bronwyn. I didn't say good morning, I just said morning. I mean, not unexpected, but you know, the only conclusion that I come to is that President Zuma is committing sabotage. If we choose to break the law and have a tax revolt, pay our taxes into a trust account or something like that, somebody got that going, it would be something that I would advocate and support.
A radical move, Mark, there that you're suggesting. Have you at this stage engaged with any other business leaders?
I haven't engaged with anybody at all. As we speak, I'm on my way to the airport. I'm flying out to the States. So I suppose the real question is, should I come back?
Give us a sense of what you feel is happening in South Africa at this juncture.
Well, I first of all think that Mr. Zuma has given us all a very early April Fool joke. And to say a joke is to say that with the greatest irony. This is a further slipping down that slippery slope that we've seen, particularly since the Zuma administration came in.
On the line now, I have Stephen Koseff, CEO of Investec. Stephen, thanks very much for joining us this morning. And we're moving towards lunchtime. I want you to go right in now. Give me your view.
To just remove the Minister of Finance and the Deputy Minister of Finance on the basis that it was done, in the way it was done, begs a hell of a lot of questions for our broader society.
Your reaction to these developments that have unfolded on the political space in the last few hours?
Well, it's obviously deeply disturbing, and this creates a lot of uncertainty about the future and whether this nuclear program is going to be pushed through without due process.
It's great. You say that you slept well. How? You must have been the only South African who's done that.
Well, I didn't know about it until I woke up this morning. So when I was preparing coffee for myself, the radio told me that we have a new finance minister and lots more other ministers. The crux really of the matter is not whether they are known or not known, is whether they have the capacity to face up and solve the challenges that South Africa and the people of South Africa are faced with.
Do we need a Russian solution to a South African problem?
Well, we already have a Russian solution. Jacob Zuma, remember, was chief of intelligence or counterintelligence in the ANC. So we already have a Vladimir Putin in South Africa, which is Jacob Zuma. So we've gone past that stage. And he is as powerful as Putin is, which is why he can fire the Minister of Finance and replace him with a completely compromised former Minister of Home Affairs who nearly destroyed the country's tourism industry, and he puts him there and says, now you do my bidding.
I can tell you right now, Fifi, the people that are here are actually outraged at the president's decision to remove the ministers and deputy ministers. They want something radical to happen at this moment. They're asking questions to the ANC, to the various parties. They want solutions to this ongoing crisis at the moment, as they term it.
They now realize that they made a big mistake in appointing President Jacob Zuma.
Well, Vavi, as you know, he said Zuma was a tsunami that could not be stopped. We had a break-in where the computers and the personal information of all the judges in South Africa disappeared. Now, who has a motive to steal this information? It's the guy who has over 700 charges of corruption waiting for him.
We have a very proud democratic tradition here. So we don't mind consulting with each other in your presence. But don't misread it, eh?
If you look at the events in South Africa in the last couple of years, should I say, I think there are certain patterns that you have seen, events that point to particular interests being protected, being consolidated, being deepened. I think South Africans need to, you have the responsibility, I keep on making the point of connecting these dots to say, what is the political moment in the country? And if we're not doing that, I can tell you now, by the time I think the disaster hits the country, we'll actually be accused of having lived with our eyes wide shut, when actually political decay is deepening. The report is nonsensical, to be frank. Whether you read it from whatever angle you read it, even if you consider language of it, by the way, it's like it's written by amateurs. Even if you consider the logic of it, it's fundamentally so flawed. South Africa is an open economy. So how do you not mobilize investors outside of the country to ensure that they invest in the economy?
These are serious national issues. And when, if you don't mind me saying so with great respect, when the media only chases sound bites and doesn't paint a complete picture, right, and doesn't represent the facts in sufficient detail so that ordinary South Africans are empowered with both the facts and sufficiently rounded knowledge, which enables them to ask the question, are these guys representing our interests? Or are they doing their own thing?
The Finance Minister of South Africa, Pravin Gordhan, has been sacked in the cabinet reshuffle. This comes after days of speculation that upset the country's stock market and currency. Mr. Gordhan, who fought hard against corruption, he'll be replaced by the Home Affairs head, Malusi Gigaba, according to a statement issued late on Thursday by the president's office. And when just glancing at some of these stocks that are exposed to South Africa, you are seeing them trading down heavily here in this morning's trade, off somewhere in the region of 4 to almost 8% when it comes to Old Mutual, down by 7.8%. Let's, in the meantime, though, head out to Bronwyn Nielsen, who joins us from Johannesburg. Bronwyn, good to have you with us. Just bring us the latest on this cabinet reshuffle and on some of these moves that we're seeing.
Louisa, thanks very much for that introduction. We are all over the place, to be fair, and I've just heard your commentary on some of our stocks, including Old Mutual. The banks are bouncing around all over the place. At open, they were down 7%. Retraced some ground when we heard news reports of Secretary General Gordhan coming through strongly, and Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa both taking a stand in news reports on News 24, saying that they had stood against the axing of former Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan. Now, that was literally 10-15 minutes ago, but subsequently we are seeing the markets under pressure again. We are watching the dollar rand very, very carefully. Just to take you back to Monday last week, dollar rand was sitting at around 12.34. Once the finance minister was recalled, the week has seen the deterioration in the local unit, some 10%. The market is waiting to see if we have any moves, any public moves from the top 6 in terms of taking a definite stand against South African President Jacob Zuma.
Bronwyn, thank you very much for that. Bronwyn Nielsen joining us live there from Johannesburg on the latest news from there on this cabinet reshuffle.
A democracy can only work if citizens are informed. A democracy can only work if those citizens get the opportunity to question us and ask us to explain ourselves, not get away with all the things that we want to get away with. If indeed decisions are being made elsewhere, which determines the future of institutions, which impact on the future of our country, then we should all be very afraid. We're not walking out of the door voluntarily. And that's a decision that each person must make in their own right.
I'm wondering if you think President Zuma is still fit to be president. Do you think that he is corrupt or merely being manipulated by people who are corrupt?
Is ANN 7 here? So we're going to give them a special slot for a question, because they have a lot to say with so-called independent analysts. And they have a lot to say when they want to attack us and malign us and try to disgrace us. So where's ANN 7? Any question?
Come on, be fair.
No, this is very fair. This is very fair. Would you like to be the subject of daily and nightly attacks? This is very fair. All we're saying, there shouldn't be any booing, so I agree with that. All I'm saying is that, you see, why must we constantly deal with people who are never seen in the public domain? Never. But they mastermind all these attacks on family, make false accusations, pay somebody called Bell Pottinger. You know them? Yes. PR firms are hired, millions of rands are spent. To do what? To do what? To malign democratic institutions of South Africa. And Moody's next week and out of the dog box. I don't think we're quite in the dog box. I think there are a lot of good things that are happening in South Africa. The rand until yesterday was still the best performing currency amongst emerging markets. The growth dynamic in emerging markets is very positive. There are sort of green shoots that can be seen in the global economy. And that was a conversation when we attended the G20 meeting recently. But it's up to us as South Africans and the different constituencies that we're trying to bring together to inspire confidence in our economy, firstly. Secondly, demonstrate that we're capable of bringing about some of the reforms, for example, good governance in SOCs. And thirdly, convince people that the so-called political noise in South Africa is normal political noise in any society, and the kind of political competition that we're going to see within the ANC is competition that you see in any political party as well. I know the president from 1974. That's when the president and about 10 others were released from Robben Island. And we were amongst the young activists who worked with the president at the time. And when he's got relaxed and has the time, he'll share with you the manner in which we helped him and many other ex-Robben Islanders and helped him to leave the country as well in 1976. Secondly, we've had no tension between us, as far as I'm concerned.
The reality is that we are at a crossroad as a country. That's the point I was making. And some of the issues that we are talking about are linked to that fact.
The rounds of applause, the candid moments, I believe we got an insight to Pravin Gordhan and CNBC Jonas. That's going to take a while to just call them as regular people without their prefix.
Reassure everybody that there'll be policy consistency.
Why do you think the minister takes such a view of your commentary?
It's a very interesting time in the world, and I think one of the aspects that we've noticed, particularly in the Western world, is what we've seen with the likes of Brexit, where there's what we call a constitution, or as it were, democracy, starting to show a little bit of a gap of what can happen if masses actually move towards a different direction to what a lot of people would accept to be acceptable. It is good for us as South Africans to experience democracy as it is and to be able to see that the people that we put in power have so much authority, have so much power, and if we analyze further and identify people who we believe should be at the helm, then they should be held responsible for the decision that they make, because we put them there. And that is the reason why it's important for us in terms of the market, as they respond as they do, to remember we chose the leadership that's leading South Africa today.
Exactly. You can't speak about yesterday's decision, especially looking at what happened last night. I mean, the next meeting, am I in for keeping rates steady?
You guys are being unfair.
Clive, we need to have you back.
You're being unfair because I said strip out politics. That's what I said.
But you can't, because even the Reserve Bank governor could not strip out the politics. But Clive, we're going to have to wrap it up there. We'll have you in studio.
Oh, before he does that, please, we're going to have to take a short break. We'll be back just a little later with Ralph Matega.
Some news that has just come in. It is understood that the Democratic Alliance, which is the official opposition party, is set to seek a court interdiction to stop President Jacob Zuma from swearing in his new ministers and deputy ministers later on Friday.
Well, I think it's a waste of time. I don't even think the court ought to listen to that. It's not up to the judiciary to second guess the executive prerogative. And I'm not saying what President Jacob Zuma has done is right. It's wrong. I think that there are sinister motive behind this cabinet reshuffle. Members of ANC feel that they have not been consulted. But for the DA to think that they can go to court and get this overturned, what is the basis of that? There is no Brian Molefe among those who have been brought into cabinet.
How much justice can we get by seeking justice from the courts? They seem to be the only organ of state that's fully functioning. How much justice can we seek from these guys when they themselves are under attack?
I think that first of all, the court is preoccupied with other issues of public interest. And let me give you another version of this. If the DA succeed in removing President Jacob Zuma through the court, it means the DA would have cut the corners.
I feel like we're looking at things, right? But we're not really addressing the problem in the House. Now, what I've always heard from commentators out there, from disgruntled and disempowered members of the ANC from that way gone era, you know, we've heard them come out and, you know, vehemently go against some of the decisions taken by the NEC, the top six, or President Jacob Zuma. But is there someone who can really hold him accountable? You hear Gordhan saying, I did not get that list. That is not the list that we saw at Luthuli House. That list got augmented, and I am just as surprised about this list. There was another list. So if Gordhan cannot hold the president accountable in the ANC, who will ultimately hold President Zuma accountable?
The reality is that Gordhan is not the ANC. He's just the Secretary General of the
Is
ANC.
Jacob Zuma the ANC?
No, he's not.
With all that has gone on in politics now, where do you see interest rates going from here on?
I think it's still uncertain to look at where interest rates will go, but what the events of the past 24 hours certainly create an environment in which the Reserve Bank will be absolutely reluctant to reduce interest rates over the coming year.
Zap Hero. He joins us now via Skype. Jonathan, how are you?
I'm not too good. I'm sure most people are not feeling too good either. I mean, as a cartoonist, it's fine. I feel fine as a cartoonist, but as a citizen and as somebody who wants the country not to tank and not to become a banana republic, yeah, no, I don't feel good at all. Whatever negative things are being said about this man, how low can he go? It's obvious that all he's doing is staying out of jail and trying to find as many opportunities for his cronies and his family and himself to get to the trough and get as much there before, you know, he eventually has to leave as possible. And those are his objectives. He does not care what the casualties, he doesn't care about the poor, doesn't care about the social grants, people getting social grants, he doesn't care about the prospects of the country or you know, it's unbelievable how callous he is.
Give me a sense of how you are feeling right now, and obviously bringing that MTN perspective to bear on our conversation.
Thanks, Bronwyn. Yes, and I mean, I can only echo things that some people have said today. I think just the way it's been done has been quite unfortunate.
So if you've got a tax revolt, you've got another year of SARS again not collecting enough revenue, and what does that mean? They'll need a bailout from Treasury, and what does that mean? It's a compromise in terms of our plans or government's plans to maintain fiscal prudence. So a very scary one, that tax revolt.
I do think that there will be some sort of a business backlash and of a civil backlash, though.
And just as we move to, again, coming back to what we perceive as this calm, are we hyping this? Do you think that the media is responsible for hyping this, and actually it's much ado about nothing? I need to ask the question.
I will be the first to say that I am disappointed in a sense, you know, not necessarily that I wanted it to be, you know, I wanted the currency to be trading at 14 to the dollar or anything, but I expected much wider, you know, peaks and troughs.
You know, Bronwyn, in terms of us hyping it, I agree with you. You keep on going to referring to the losses of the banks and the financial sectors, and those sectors, I think, are reflecting the real impact of exactly what this decision means. Down 5%, financials also 3%. And, you know, if we look at what these some of the stocks exposed to South Africa are doing in London, I mean, Old Mutual at one stage, 9% lower. We spoke to Investex, Stephen Kossef, 9% as well. And even Steinhoff. Steinhoff is benefiting from the fact that it's a rand hedge this side, so the share price is up, but in Europe, not such luck. So perhaps we are not overstating the extent to which this is a serious concern.
2 days ago, they closed 24% down on that day. Do you want to know where it is now? 28% up.
You see, and there's a second
I don't
installment.
know if there's a thread. I don't know.
There's a second installment coming on that discussion. So
I think we know who's winning.
Let's dig a little deeper. Aviwe, give us a sense of the drama. How many people? Is this something that we really need to take seriously? And is the action going to spread in terms of further protest action?
Bronwyn right behind me now. Hundreds of people. A fair number if you judge the people over here, but it's a relative number. They're walking into the union buildings right now. Remember, this is where the ministers will be sworn in later tonight at 6 o'clock. So you can stay tuned in for that here at CNBC Africa. So the people are making their way in here. They want to vent their frustrations at the president, expecting the president to be here as well later on, as he is the person that's going to swear in the ministers.
Do you believe that that is why people are protesting and that they will take it further?
You can hear them yourself behind. They are actually screaming that the President Jacob Zuma must fall at this moment. So I think the intention is circulated around that, disturbing the ministerial swearing-in process, and also letting the president know how they feel.
Let's start with the best scenario and track down to the worst scenario.
Okay, well, we're looking at about 5 scenarios. I'd say our upcase scenario is one where we actually get a lot better governance in South Africa. So sadly, I've had to relook at the probabilities of the scenarios this morning, and this upcase has fallen from 15%, obviously out of 100, to 10% now. And the sad thing is that our extreme down case has now risen to 19%. Yes, 35% chance of a sub-investment credit grade rating in terms of our hard currency. And what we really perceive on this basis is that we actually are at risk of losing our country or hard currency rating, which is at the last notch, but still maintaining our local currency rating, which is further downgraded. So it's no longer the BBB or BBB plus, but it falls to BBB minus, and that's because of concern from the credit rating agencies of fiscal deterioration.
Now we know we're going to hear from Moody's on Friday next week. So is this likely to happen next week Friday? And Moody's will be the first one to come forward.
Okay, so basically what we're anticipating is the 2 country reviews really this year for Standard & Poor's and Fitch, and that's June and December, and they're the ones who've got us on this very last rung of investment grade, BBB minus for a hard currency rating, and with a negative outlook, so we could fall off. Basically what happens when you get a credit rating downgrade, as you know, your long-term interest rates rise, your cost of borrowing rises, your risks to your economy rise substantially, and of course that puts pressure on the short end. The repo rate and the Reserve Bank typically will respond by hiking interest rates. So yes, in our down case scenario, we actually see the repo rate moving to 10 by 2018, and of course with the rand moving past 17 and potentially up to 19 rand to the US dollar. In that type of environment, we must stress it's severe loss of fiscal discipline.
Mr. Mayor, thank you so much for joining us. Can you give us a sense of how you are digesting the news that hit us at around 11:30 last night?
I think I'm really so pleased to see civil society standing up to the destruction of our country, because we cannot allow Jacob Zuma and the ANC to capture our treasury and capture our country in this fashion.
It's the worst case scenario. You're quite correct. It is a failed state scenario. In my analysis, it's on the path to the failed state. But of course, if the down case becomes our baseline or our expected case, then that extreme down case hops into the down case category. We've got to then build a new extreme down case, and that really is the risk. So yes, then you probably would look at a Zimbabwe-style scenario.
What is the sense from the internal meetings that you've had today as to what we need to brace ourselves for?
My sense at this stage is that the resistance is not as strong as it was last time. That may indicate that at least in the short term, the decision is far more likely to stand than the previous decision was. So I think that what one needs to look for in the next few days is this resistance going to gather pace, or are we in a situation where the resistance has been worn down over the last few months by the constant pressure on Mr. Gordhan and Mr. Jonas? If you look at a vote of no confidence, the ANC has 249 members of parliament. It would probably take about 60 of those, which if you think about it is only 1/4, to vote for a motion of no confidence, and that motion would succeed. On the other hand, I do agree that it's not going to happen, and it's not going to happen less because of Mr. Zuma's power than of a culture within the ANC where people just don't do that sort of thing. I'm not convinced that he has this great power that everybody says he has, but the reality at the moment is that the very important forces in the society, which are clearly opposed to this move, don't seem to have an adequate response at this stage.
We've already seen the Youth League issuing statements of support, and in particularly congratulating the President on the appointment of now or soon-to-be Finance Minister Malusi Gigaba. Give us a sense of your take and the ANC Youth League stance on the reshuffle as we've seen it.
I think the message that we send into all of us is that the old guard is now ready to hand over to younger generations.
Colin, I do want to push you on this intergenerational narrative that you're putting forward, because there has been a lot of criticism about a number of ministerial positions that have been left untouched and where underperformance has been a key question around those posts. So assuming that your argument holds that this is to be congratulated in terms of seeing the old guard making a way for new and emerging leadership, what do you make of some of the ministers that have publicly been said to not have performed and yet they remain in their cabinet positions?
The only people who can say ministers have performed or not performed, or the only person who can say that is the president.
We must make way for new leadership, but also if people are doing their jobs, as has been the case with the former minister Pravin Gordhan and his deputy Mcebisi, surely that should be left intact?
This reshuffle is not about it. See, firstly, we want to appeal to the leadership of the ANC to stop being dramatic.
We cross over now to Pretoria, where our colleague Aviwe Mtila is in Pretoria, standing by with Zwelinzima Vavi.
Labour Federation leader, Zwelinzima Vavi, of course well known in the political spheres of South Africa. He just gave a speech now right outside the Union building as part of the Save South Africa campaign, where he said he spoke to the ministers.
The point that I was making, though, to the comrades is that in the discussion, a brief discussion we had with the ministers, it became clear that there is such an information gap between what we know and what has been happening behind the scenes in government. And to tell you again, what we came here mobilizing for, fearing the worst for South Africa, is 10 times less than the scale of corruption, looting, and systematic taking over of institutions that protect our economy, that protect our democracy. South Africa is in trouble, and we're going to be meeting over this weekend to look at how do we sustain a campaign to get South Africans to know, to just know what is happening in the just below their noses.
These developments, together with relevant policy announcements from the new cabinet, could result in Fitch reviewing its ratings on the South African sovereign. Of course, it's a really strong message, still quite put diplomatically, Fifi, but it does sound like a warning bell to say that if we see the variables that we are tracking no longer meeting the requirements that could keep South Africa at a BBB negative, we will potentially reopen the conversation at a sovereign downgrade for South Africa, and of course we know that route for the country.
We're already seeing the effect it's had on the economy, and I imagine that's going to get worse as the week goes on. And obviously the big concern is the ratings downgrades that are now looming. One of the things the rating agency spoke very clearly about was political stability.
What is your view as PISA, and how are you making sense of what's happening?
Thank you. Well, I think firstly, even though the fast response in terms of tabling a vote of no confidence shows proactiveness and responsiveness on the part of the opposition, but I don't think that it's likely to pan out in terms of an impeachment against President Jacob Zuma.
From a political strategy point of view, it's in the interest of Cyril Ramaphosa and his supporters and his followership to actually retain his position as deputy president, because he will not retain power outside of the current structure. And of course, the resignation of former President Thabo Mbeki and the mass resignation of Deputy President Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka and others is a vivid memory in that regard. So lots to talk about still.
Where does the EFF stand regarding the political events that unfolded in the past few hours?
Well, we have indicated that we reject this latest shenanigans by Zuma. He seems to have acted alone, even without the ANC. And we think that those are signs of a creeping dictatorship if he's able to even defy his own organization.
Dalia, it's understood that the EFF has been in meaningful or deep consultations with their legal team, and I don't doubt that you are part of those voices there. What is the legal route that the EFF is going to take now? What are your options, and which ones are you going to be exercising?
We may or may not join in some of the legal cases that are happening. But we are of the view that anybody who takes this matter to court might get a good hearing on the basis that Zuma clearly acted on an irrational basis and on the basis of a fake so-called intelligence report.
Let's take a quick look at the markets. We're about 5 minutes before the close and we're sitting at 13.37 off the day's lows. Interesting now to watch in the last couple of minutes of trade. Fifi.
Most definitely off the day is lows, but again, as Bronwyn, you've been saying throughout the entire day, we were at 12.30 on Monday. As we can see, the banks down 6%. So coming off their lows as well, they were down 5% a little earlier, but we're seeing some pressure come through there. Financials too, down 3.5% at this stage.
10 new ministers, 10 new deputy ministers, and it stands to be seen how the market will react on Monday morning.
Most definitely, and we'll be bringing you that reaction first thing on Monday morning, so make sure that you're watching. For now, have a great weekend. It's goodbye from myself and Bronwyn, Nielsen and the team.
Well, goodbye, a version of ourselves, because you're going to be watching highlights packages of all the rolling coverage that CNBC Africa has been bringing you this unprecedented day here in South Africa.